It's been moved by Councillor Brunton and seconded by Councillor Height that council resume an open session at 7:20 PM. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We finished our closed session and direction was given to staff. I have nothing to report out of that. I would like to take a 10-minute break until 7:30 and then we'll conclude. Moved by Wells, seconded by all, oh, well, I'm sorry, are there any other questions for the general manager before I get the motions? Okay, I'll get to the motion then. The Wells moved, Oliver seconded that this staff report on Clinton Street parking restrictions be received as information and that a bylaw be executed to amend parking bylaw number 2011-189 to establish parking restrictions to prohibit parking on the northwest side of Clinton Street between Main Street and St. Andrew Street, and that staff be directed to paint parking spaces on the Clinton Street, or on Clinton Street on the southeast side of the road. Further discussion? Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. We'll go now to 11B. 11B is Staff Report 1724. This is the Water and Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee and options for rate charge for processing waste haulage. There's the report on 11B, and I think there's, in a minute, there are some attachments. Well, I'll have a look while we get the report. I thought there was some more after. Okay. James, sorry. Yes, this is yours. Okay, James, if you'd give the report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With consultation from Leela Robinson of Public Works as well as David Cribbs, County Manager, report FS 17-24 Water and Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee and options for rates charged for processing waste haulage is being presented to you tonight. This report is as a result of Council directing staff to form an ad hoc committee to review water and wastewater rates. This report also discusses options for holding tank rates, as the rate currently being used was put in place until more options were presented. The attachments to the report outlines the terms of reference for the ad hoc committee. Per policy EBS 39, the policy for boards and committees for council. Boards and committees are proposed by resolution of council and an established bylaw. Each bylaw shall incorporate a terms of reference for the specific board or committee. For the holding tank rates, each option is a blended rate strategy, which combines the rates for holding, portable, and septic waste. The option staff is recommending is option 4, which still incorporates the principles and guidelines of the rate study, but with a 40% subsidy applied to incorporate the concerns of the residents. Option 1 is to simply charge the recommended rate. Option 2 is to phase in the recommended rate, while option 3 is to charge a benchmark rate through a survey of a number of municipalities and taking the average. Please note that the rate figures used in this report for comparative purposes are from the 2016 rate study. The rates used for the 2018 rate budget will be adjusted by economic factors such as changes in costs as well as volumetric changes. If there are any questions about this report, I would be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brunton, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Read this report a couple of times, totally understand it, and I appreciate your report, James, and your help on it. It's a good report, lots of detail. A couple of questions, and I guess to different staff, if I may, Mayor Luke. Lee, you mentioned at one time only certain plants can handle the blended rate, their waste. Is that correct still? And what are they?
Through the mayor to council, only certain facilities have the ability to receive septage.
Irregardless if it's holding tank or septic tank?
Correct. We don't have, for example, in Waterford, we don't have the facility for a truck to come in to dump into the Waterford system.
Okay, the blended rate though can go where?
Port Rowan, sorry, you're taxing my memory, bear with me. Port Rowan, Simcoe, and Dover.
Dover too?
I believe so.
Okay, and Mike, I guess, you know, I like the report. I certainly want to hear the rest of the discussion, but we don't recover full rates on a lot of things. You know, you mentioned in arenas and so forth, so, and I realized when we put the $33 rate in, we kind of blew the roof off a few people there. They didn't like the total cost of what it would if they frequently emptied their tanks. So I kind of lean towards, I like the report, and I like the 40% subsidized rate. But the other question I have is the total, Lee, right now when you run these plants, do they pay as they enter, or is it like on a billing system?
Through the mayor to council, we bill them monthly for the services that they receive.
And do you have many, are you chasing much money out of those recoveries? Or are they pretty good, these people at paying their bills?
Through the mayor to council, they are pretty good at paying their bills. Council will recall we actually approve which companies can actually haul to our facilities. Council does that approval, so they have all been, we have very little difficulty with them paying their bills.
But do you have some?
Yeah, I would say not consistently. It might be a month that somebody got misplaced or something, but we don't have anybody typically that we had to. I believe we had 1 or 2 cases in the past where we issued letters to them and advised them that they would not be able to use the facility historically, and stuff was paid up. And I believe the treasurer would like to add something to that.
Thank you, through the mayor. I can assure council that we have never had to write any fees off as it relate to water waste haulage.
Okay. And looking at page, I guess 4 or 6 or 11, is that how I'd word it? Page 4 of 6, it shows the different municipal rates. And the 40% rate would be slightly above Brantford, but considerably above Haldeman, the way I read it. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Haldeman County's rate is $13.52 per cubic meter, but I didn't want to complicate the report too much. They also have a yearly administration charge that is on top of that, which Norfolk County doesn't have.
What would that, like, none of these, like, I realize the trucking companies, they charge their own rate for haulage, correct? And it could be all over the map, correct? Well, the only other thing I'll say before talk about, I do like the 40%. I realize it's double what we are charging now, but 40% I don't think is out of line with considering some of the other things we subsidize. But I really don't think we need a committee to deal with this. I think it's just something we don't need. We got enough committees, and I don't know what they do after they set a rate. Thank you.
Councillor Sonnenberg, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had trouble understanding this right from the outset. Where did this concept of blending come from? I mean, we see it in other municipalities, so it's quite common. But reading from the report, it's a cost of service with a % subsidy. The outcome of reducing the rate for processing hauled waste will result in lower revenue and higher rates being charged to other groups. Why should someone help pay for a service someone else gets if that's the lifestyle they've chosen to live? If you don't live in town where there's a sewer system, that's your choice. If you don't live in a country where you got to have a septic bed, that's your choice. But if you live somewhere where you got to have a holding tank, why should somebody else help pay to pump it out? I need someone to explain this blended concept. Thank you.
Through the mayor to council, I guess there's a variety of ways at looking at blended things. The cost to treat wastewater at the Waterford facility versus the Simcoe facility versus Port Rowan or Dover, each one of those facilities has a different cost to treat each cubic meter of sewage. Council made the decision many, many years ago that rather than have a different rate associated with every facility, that Norfolk County would have a single rate for sewage and a single rate for water, regardless of what supply or disposal system that you were connected to. Carrying that through, when it comes to that, holding tanks and septic tanks have very different sewer characteristics than municipal sewage. So in fact, you end up with 3 different ones. From an industry point of view, there are very few haulers who will go around and only pump out, say, porta potties, and then send a different truck to go around and do holding tanks and a different one to do the septic systems. The end result of that is that all of those different types of sewage end up being mixed in one vehicle when they arrive at our facility. So the rate comes from the fact that the waste stream that we actually receive at our facility is typically a mixed stream, which has holding tanks, it has septic tanks, it has portable toilets. And that's why the recommendation was originally to go forward with a blended rate, because the material we receive is blended.
But still, Mike Columbus, who lives in town, pays sewer rates, is subsidizing somebody in Turkey Point to have their septic or their holding tank pumped. Am I not right?
The way it currently stands today, that is correct. Yet at the same time, somebody in, say, Waterford would be subsidizing somebody in, say, Simcoe for the treatment of their sewage, because it costs us less to treat sewage in Waterford than it does to treat sewage in Simcoe. So there is already the subsidy that exists within that system.
Thank you, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. One of the reasons why I was the one who started that motion to form the ad hoc committee was because there seems to be a lot of issues with the water and the wastewater billing in Norfolk County. Let's remember we have the top 1 or 2 as the highest rates of water and wastewater in the province of Ontario. So something needs to be looked at. I know we've had the consultant in 2013, they did a study. Our staff has worked with them too, but yet we've been unable so far to come up with a fair and equitable system. And while we talk about fair and equitable, we seem to be picking on holding tank people. Okay, so this isn't the part, or this is the part where it starts not to get fair. Because I can go back through all the numbers, I brought all my spreadsheets today, and I can tell you that leachate costs recommended from the consultant was $359,000. But somewhere between the consultant's report, the staff's report, council's approval, it's now $864,000. So there's a difference there, and that difference is being made up by the taxpayers of Norfolk County and not the ratepayers because of some made-up percentage. Okay, so holding tanks, when we increased the rate from $6 and something to $10, I know the holding tank customers that phoned me said their bill went from $120 to $170. Okay, I imagine the hauler, you don't want bumps. You don't want to have to raise your rate up every time Norfolk County raises your rate, so you just pick a number and run with it. So raising it up by $20 or whatever, okay, they could factor it in and it'll be $250 to get your tank pumped out. So, but that's not where the problem lies. That's one of the problems in this entire equation, but there's more to it than that. It's not hard to tell. You start going through the system, and our treasurer, our former treasurer, gave me some data on some of our large water customers. If you wonder who's subsidizing who, I can tell you there's 2 customers in Simcoe right now that use 15.1% of all the water out of the Simcoe factory, and it appears in my calculations that the ratepayers are subsidizing them to the tune of $200,000 per year. It's fairly easy to figure out the math on this one. It costs $18 million to run our water and septic plants. Start dividing that up back by the amount of stuff we put through it at 4 million cubic meters each, and you'll have your rate at 208. All right? And then if you look at our staff recommendations, it's $1.38 for one and $1.62 for another one. Mathematically, there's so many variables in there because you have base meters. We have 15,000 base meters out there, all with different rates. What we really need is we need to look at this as we need a solution to this entire problem. And with the ad hoc committee, we know how many people were upset with the holding tank rates. So obviously they were contacting, we know Mr. Andrews went around to every single plant that Norfolk County had on a tour. He's willing to spend the time and put the time in. I had at least 2 accountants, we're talking controllers, that they would devote time in helping us solve our problem. Because it is a problem when you have the second highest rates. And subsidization, yeah, that's happening all over through here now. So yeah, we could pick on the holding tank and septic people, but then what about your big groups? You know, your large users, by the looks of it in my calculations, use 53% of the water. Are they paying 53% of the bill? I'm thinking they're not. I can't see it. So really this whole entire section needs a reboot, and I don't know if it was the terms and conditions that DFA, when they did their study, were sent about to not look at it as an entire aspect, and it can all be changed, and we don't have to have rates that high. The way it is right now too, you get punished if you use less water. Does that make sense? If you only use 3 cubic meters, you're paying way more than you are by meter than if you use 20. That doesn't seem fair and just. So, like, I'm definitely not going to agree with and further that last one, but I would like to see the committee formed, and I'd like to see staff work with them and come up with a solution that we can all live with. You can move and manipulate numbers around, and that's been done. Leachate costs almost $2 million the firemen took a hit on. So, and that's the taxpayers paying for that, for their share for the water. In the hydrants and things like that, there are ways to move this around to make it more fair to the entire group. I don't see why we have to pick on one particular section and then let other people off way easier, Mr. Mayor. So with that, I'll move that. I'll make the motion to move the recommendation except for that and further that. The option 4 stuff, I'm not dealing with that. That's not fair and equitable, in my opinion.
So if I may, you just want to move that the report be received as information.
And that an ad hoc committee be formed according to the terms of reference in report FS 17-24.
Okay, from and further that, you want that eliminated. I got you now. Do I have a seconder for that? I have a mover. Councillor Wells? Yeah, I'll be right with you there. Height has moved and Wells. My next speaker is Oliver and then Columbus, and we do have a motion on the floor now, but I will recognize the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll support the motion, although I was originally asked to put my hand up in order to comment more on the rate part. But if we're only dealing with the first 2 recommendations in the report right now, which obviously we are because that's the motion, I'll speak to that, and then I presume we'll deal with the third part after that, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Hyde. I think it would be useful to us because from time to time issues will come up with the water and wastewater system, and I think an ad hoc committee that we would rely on, and just said once a year as a minimum, that's not too much of an onerous task. I was disappointed though to see that there were no proposed external participants on the committee. And I don't know whether that was part of Councillor Height's original proposal to have, as an example, somebody from Veolia, perhaps a property owner, because right now the committee's just talking about being composed of 5 members of council. Am I missing something? I'm sorry. Okay, well, I certainly stand to be corrected.